Okay, this should be working. Hi guys, so I'm a bit late because had to eat before the stream, and yeah, so we are gonna start with the reading. So let's get into it. Okay, so we stopped at page 68, so I'm gonna read page 69, and let's see how far we go. Okay, where's the story? Okay. Part 7. When the smoke and flames cleared, the entire area looked like hell. The metal railings had warped like sugar sculptures. Sorry, wait, I need to tweet out that I'm streaming. Sorry. Okay. Okay. Sorry. Where do... Okay. Sorry. Part 7. When the smoke and flames cleared, the entire area looked like hell. The metal railings had warped like sugar sculptures, and even the floor tiles had melted into something like glue. The paint on the walls had peeled so the concrete was visible. The boy was nowhere to be seen. However, Style heard the footsteps of someone running along the passageway downstairs. Innocentius, he whispered, and the flames spread out across the area, returned to human form, went over the railing and followed the footsteps. Inside, Style was astonished. Nothing all that amazing had happened just before the explosion. In the instant, Style had sliced through the giant flame god with the two flame swords. Hamijo had let go with his right hand and jumped over the railing. As he fell, Kamijo had grabbed the railing one floor below and pulled himself up onto the passageway. He had no lifeline and had pulled it off with pure guts and courage, so it had actually been quite reckless. But Style gave a gentle smile. Kamijo now knew the weakness of the runes thanks to the knowledge of Index's 103,000 grimoires. As she had said, the rune magic Style used was activated by carved engravings. That also meant that getting rid of the engravings would negate even the most powerful magic. So what? Style's expression showed no sign of concern. You can do it. It's utterly impossible for you to completely get rid of the runes carved into this building. I really thought I was gonna die back there. After jumping over the railing on the 7th floor with no lifeline, Kamiju's heart was still pounding into his chest. As he ran along the straight passageway, he looked around. He did not fully believe what Index had said. He had merely been trying to get away from Innocentius so he could get some time to prepare himself. Damn it, what the hell is this? But Kamijo could not help but shout out when he saw what lay before him. He did not need to worry where the runes were carved into the large dorm building. In fact, he had already found them. They were on the floor, on the doors, and on the fire extinguisher. Scraps of paper about the size of telephone cards were stuck all over the building like Hoichi the Earless. Based on Index's advice, he did not like having to recall that doll-like face. He guessed that the magic was something like a jamming signal called a barrier, and the runes were like the antenna, sending the signal. But could he even tear off every single one of the 10,000 of antennae? With the roar of oxygen being absorbed, a human-shaped flame dropped down on the opposite of the metal railing. Shit. If he was caught again, he would be unable to tear them off. Kamiju immediately made a dash for the emergency staircase to his side. As he jumped further and further down, he could see scraps of paper to the corners of the staircase and ceiling with strange symbols that must have been runes written on them. They had clearly been mass-produced with a copy machine. Kamiju almost shouted, how's a crappy copy like that supposed to work? But then he recalled that the appendix of shoujo manga could be used for tarot divination, and even the Bible was mass-produced at a print shop. You know, the cult just isn't fair. He felt like crying. Tens of thousands of those rune engravings were probably taped up all over the building. Could he find every single one of them? And for all he knew, Style was taping up new pieces of copy paper at that very moment. As if to cut off his train of thought, and a sentence dropped down from farther up the staircase. Shit. Kamiju gave up on heading farther down the staircase and ran into the passageway to the side. When the giant flame god struck the floor, flames scattered about the area, and it charged into the passageway even as it bounced up from hitting the ground. The passageway was straight, and Kamiju had no way to lose innocence when it came to pure speed. Kamiju looked over to the entrance of the emergency staircase. According to the display, he was on the second floor. With a roar, Innocentians charged straight forward in order to arrest Kamiju's right hand. Awa. Instead of using his right hand or running away from the passageway, Kamiju jumped over the second floor railing. It was only after he jumped that he realized that the ground below was asphalt and that a number of bicycles were stopped there. Wah! He just barely managed to land between two bicycles, but he still landed on hard asphalt. As he tried to bend his knee to absorb the shock of impact, but he heard an unpleasant noise from his ankle. He only jumped from the second story, and it did not feel broken, but he had hurt his ankle a bit all the same. He heard the roar of flames absorbing oxygen coming from above. Kamiju scrambled along the ground, kicking bicycles over as he did so, but nothing more happened. Kamiju looked up with a puzzled look. Still making the roaring noise, Innocentius was clinging to the second-story railing and staring at Kamiju, who was on the ground. It was almost like there was an invisible wall keeping it from following Kamiju. Apparently, the runes had only been placed on the dorm building. Kamiju had managed to escape Styles' flames by leaving the building. Seeing that aspect of the runes made him feel like he now knew a bit of the invisible system of magic. He was not against a ridiculous opponent like the magicians in RPGs, who could do anything by chanting a spell. Instead, his opponent acted based on set rules similar to the espers Kamiju knew. He sighed. Having been freed from any direct threat to his life, strength left Kamiju's body. He sat down on the ground without even thinking. He was not afraid. Instead, he was assaulted with a different feeling that was more like a languid exhaustion. He started to wonder if he could escape all danger if he just ran away. I know, anti-skill, Kamiju muttered. Why had he not thought of it before? Academy City's anti-skill was something like an anti-esper special unit. Kamiju could just notify them rather than risk his own life. Kamiju checked his pants pocket, but his cell phone had been crushed under his very own foot that morning. Kamiju looked out toward the road. He was looking for a payphone. He was not doing it to run away. Then will you follow me to the depths of hell? And yet those words seemed to stab into his chest. He was not doing anything wrong. And yet, in that very same situation, Index had gone back for Kamiju Toma. Kamiju just could not think about going down to hell with a stranger he had known for less than half an hour. Damn it, that's right. If I don't want to follow you to the depths Damn it, that's right. If I don't want to follow you to the depths of hell, Kamichi smiled, then I just have to drag you back out from them. He thought it was about time. He thought it was about time he understood that. He did not know how the magic worked, but he did not need to know what was going on where he could not see. He could send an email without needing a circuit diagram of his cell phone. How won't you understand that it's not really that big of a deal? He knew what he had to do, so now he just needed to try it. The original Japanese, Kamiju erroneously refers to anti-skill as the police in this scene. Even if he failed, it was much better than doing nothing. A metal railing warped and glowing orange fell down and Kamichu frantically rolled out of the way. He may have made up his mind, but he still had to do something about that innocentius before he could save Index. The real problem was the tens of thousands of runes, but could he really tear off all those scraps of paper taped to the building? I'm surprised the fire alarm hasn't gone off with all this going on. It had just been an offhand comment, but Kamijo Toma froze in place once he said it. The fire alarm? The fire alarms installed around the building all went off at once. Amid that storm of roaring noise that sounded a lot like a bombing raid, Style looked up at the ceiling. Without a second's delay, the attached sprinklers set out a typhoon-like man-made rain. Since having the firefighters called in would be a pain, Style had written his orders for Innocentius such that it would not touch the security sensors. That meant Kamichu Tuma must have hit the button for the fire alarm. Did he think it would put out Innocentius's flames? The notion was almost laughably ridiculous, but the magician thought the blood vessels in his head would burst when he thought about how he was getting soaked for such a stupid reason. Style stared at the red fire alarm on the wall in annoyance. It was easy enough to set the fire alarm, but he could not stop himself, as it was summer break. Most of the residents of the dorm were out, but it could be bothersome if the firefighters came. Style looked around the area and then quickly picked up Index and left. His goal was simply to recover Index, so there was no reason to get caught up in killing Kamiju. Given how long it would take for the firefighters to come, he could have Innocentius on auto chase, and the boy would get a nice flaming embrace that would turn him into black charcoal or white ash. This doesn't mean the elevator stopped, does it? He had heard that elevators were made to stop during emergencies. That would be quite depressing for Style. He was on the 7th floor, even if the girl carrying an unconscious person downstairs was tiring. That was why Style was initially relieved to hear the microwave oven-like ding come from behind him. But then he came to his senses. Who was it? Who was on the elevator? It was the evening of summer vacation, and he had already checked to make sure all of the students had left the dorm, leaving it deserted. So who was it, and why did they need the elevator? The doors of the elevator clanged as they opened up. A single footstep on the floor wet from the sprinklers reverberated through the passageway. Style slowly turned around. He had no idea why his body was trembling on the inside. Kamiju stood there. What happened to Innocentius? Thoughts whirled around chaotically in Styles' head. Innocentius was like the cutting-edge missile floating in a fighter. After it locked on, it could never be escaped, no matter where you ran or hid. It would use its 3,000-degree flames to melt through walls or obstacles. Even if they were made of steel and continue after you, it was not something that could be escaped just by running around the building. And yet Kamiju Tuma stood there. He stood there, unfazed, unstoppable, unassailable, and most of all, an unequivocal natural enemy. Come to think of it, runes are supposed to be carved into walls and the floor, right? Said Kamichu as the cold man-made rain poured down on him. Really, you're damn amazing. To be honest, I would have no way to win if you had carved them with a knife. Feel free to brag about this all you want. As he spoke, Kamichu Toma raised his arm and pointed at above his head. He pointed at the ceiling, at the sprinkler. You can't mean those 30,000 degree flames couldn't be put out with that? Don't be stupid, not the flames. How can you put those things all over people's homes? Style then recalled the tens of thousands of rune papers he had set up on the dorm. Paper was weak to water, even kindergartners knew that. By spraying water all over the building with the sprinklers, it did not matter if there were tens of thousands of the runes. He did not need to run around the building. Instead, he could press a single button and destroy all the scraps of paper. The muscles of the magician's face spasmed. Innocentius. The instant he shouted that, the elevator door behind Kamichu melted like a sugar sculpture, and the giant flame god crawled out of the passageway. Each time the raindrops hit his body of flames, they evaporated with the sound of the beast's breathing. Ha ha ha, ha ha ha, amazing. You have the battle sense of a genius, but you lack experience. Copy paper is not the same as toilet paper. Sorry. Just getting it a bit wet isn't going to completely dissolve it. The magician spread his arms while laughter exploded from his mouth and shouted, "Kill him." Innocentian swung his arm like a hammer. Out of the way. Kamichu made that one statement. He did not even turn around. Kamichu's right hand had touched the giant flame god in his backhanded blow, and it exploded with all direction with a laughably pathetic noise. What? Style Magnus's heart truly did stop for an instant out of shock. After being blown away, Innocentians did not revive. Black field oil like chunks of flesh were splattered about the area, and all that they could do was just barely squirm a bit. Impossible. How? My runes haven't been destroyed yet. What about the ink? It seemed to take 5 years for Kamichu Toma's voice to reach Styles' ears. Even if the copy paper hasn't been destroyed, the water will make the ink come off. Kamichu spoke in leisurely manner, although that doesn't seem to have taken care of every single one of them. The squirming pieces of Innocentius disappeared into thin air one at a time as the man-made rain continued to flow from the sprinklers. It was as if the ink on the copy paper taped all over the building was coming off in rain one by one, causing Innocentius to lose power bit by bit. The chunks of flesh disappeared one by one until finally the last one dissolved and disappeared. Innocentius! Innocentius! The magician's words were like those of a man shouting into a phone receiver after being hung up on. Now then, that one statement was enough to make the magician's entire body flinch. Kamichu Toma took a step towards Style Magnus. Innocentius, the magician said, but nothing in the world responded. Kamichu Toma took another step towards Style Magnus. Innocentius, 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 the magician shouted, but nothing in the world changed. Kamichu Toma finally started charging towards Style Magnus like a bullet. Ash to ash, dust to dust, squeamish body rude. The magician finally roared, but not even a sort of flames appeared, much less the giant flame god. Kamichu Toma drew near Style Magnus and then continued even closer. He clenched his fist. Okay, any chat? No chat. Okay. He clenched his utterly normal right hand. He clenched his right hand that would be of no use unless he was using it on some kind of supernatural power. He clenched his right hand that would not let him defeat even a single delinquent. He would not raise his score on tests, and that would not make him popular with girls. But his right hand could also be quite useful. After all, He could use it to punch out the bastard standing before him. Kamijo Toma's fist slammed into the magician's face. The magician's body rotated like a bamboo copter, and the back of his head struck the metal railing. Chapter 2: The Illusionist Bestows Demise. Part 1. It was night. The sirens of the fire trucks and an ambulance rang from the main road and passed by. The dorm seemed to have been mostly abandoned, but setting off the fire alarm and starting sprinklers had changed matters. In no time at all, the empty dorm was filled with fire trucks and onlookers. Kamijo had used his right hand to destroy the tracking function of the hood in his room before taking it with him. If he had left it working and abandoned in some arbitrary place, he could have fooled the pursuers, but she obstinately insisted that she take it with her. Kamijo clicked his tongue in a back alley. He was holding Index's bloody form in his arms, as he could not let her wound touch the dirty ground. He could not give Index to an ambulance. Academy City. Academy City fundamentally disliked outsiders. That was why walls surrounded the city and 3 satellites were constantly monitoring everything. Even the drivers of the trucks that supplied convenience stores needed an exclusive ID to get in. For that reason, information on an outsider without an ID like Index would get out if she was hospitalized, and her enemy was part of an organization. But she was attacked there, the damage would spread in those around her, and she would be defenseless if she was attacked while recovering in surgery. But I can't just leave her like this. I'll be fine if you can only stop the bleeding. Index's voice was weak and showed no hint of the mechanical voice she used while explaining the ruins. And that was why Kamijo knew immediately what she had said was wrong. Her wound was beyond something an amateur could handle by wrapping a bandage around it. Kamijo was used to fight, so he performed first aid on something for most of the wounds. Best kept a secret, but the wound on her back was bad enough to make even Kamijo lose his cool. There was only one thing left they could rely on. He did not believe it, but he had nothing else to believe in. Hey, can you hear me? Kamijo lightly slapped on Index's cheek. Is there anything that can heal wounds in those 103,000 grimoires of use? Kamijo's idea of magic was nothing more than the attack magic and recovery magic from RPGs. It was true Index had said she was naturally unable to handle magic power herself, and therefore could not use magic, but Kamijo could handle supernatural powers. So if Index just told him what to do, Index breathing was shallow, but more due to the blood loss than to the pain. Her pale lips trembled. There is but. Kamijo's face lit up for an instant until the word but belatedly caught in his mind. You can do it, Index let out a small breath. Even if I taught you the spell, your power would surely get in the way. Out, even if you perfectly imitated it. Kamijo looked down at his right hand in shock. Imagine Breaker. The power residing there had indeed completely negated Styles' flames. So there was a chance it would negate Index's recovery magic in the same way. Shit, not again. Why is it always the right hand's fault? But that just meant he needed to call someone like Agomi Pierce or that Buri girl, Misaka Mikoto, the faces of a few tough people who he had not have to worry about getting involved in this kind of trouble floating up in his mind. Index felt silent for a bit. No, that isn't what I meant. No, not your right hand. The problem is that... Oh, wait. Index fell silent for a bit. No, that isn't what I meant. Not your right hand. The problem is that you're an esper. In that broiling night, she shivered like on a snowy mountain in midwinter. Magic is not something to be used by talented people like you espers. Untalented people wanted to do what the talented people could do, so they created certain spells and rituals that are known as magic. Kamiju was about ready to shout, "This is no time for explanations. You don't get it? The circuitry is different between talented people and untalented people. Talented people cannot use the systems created. For the untalented people, what?" Kamiju was left speechless. It was true that drugs and electrodes were used on espers like Kamiju to forcibly expand the circuitry of their brains in a way that was different from a normal human. It was true that their bodies were different from others, but he could not believe it. No, he did not want to believe it. 2.3 million students lived in Academy City, and every single one of them had undergone the Powers Development curriculum. Even if you could not tell by looking at them, even if they could not bend a spoon when trying so hard it burst the blood vessels in their brain, and even if they were the weakest of espers, they were indeed made differently from a normal person. In other words, the people who lived in that city could not use magic, the one thing that could save that girl. There was a way to save a person who lay before him, and yet no one could save her. Damn it, Kamiju bared his canines like a beast. How could this happen? How could this happen? What the hell is this? How is this fair? Index's trembling grew worse. What Kamiju found the hardest to bear was that she was receiving the punishment for her own inability. "Talented my ass," he spat out. "I can't even save the girl suffering before my eyes." But he could not come up with any other way of resolving the situation. The fact that the 2.3 million students living in the city could not use magic was the rule he needed to break down first. Kamiju suddenly noticed something of what he had thought. "Students? Hey, any normal talentless person can use magic, right?" Yes. "And this isn't going to end with it being useless because the person has no talent for magic, right?" "You don't need to worry about that. As long as they prepared correctly and perform it correctly, even a middle school student should be able to do it." Index thought for a bit. "Although, if they get the steps wrong, the pathways in their brain and their neural circuitry could be fried. But without the knowledge of my 103,000 grimoires, it will be fine." "Do not worry," Kamiju smiled. Without thinking, he looked up as to howl to the moon in the night sky. It was true that 2.3 million students lived in Academy City and that they all had been developed to have some kind of esper power, but the teachers that developed them were normal humans. "I hope she isn't already asleep." The face of a certain teacher appeared in Kamiju Tuma's mind. It was the face of Tsukuyomi Komoi, the 135-centimeter homeroom teacher of his class, who a red rendo would suit despite her being a teacher. Kamiju used the payphone to get Komoi-sensei's address from Agomi Pierce. Kamiju had dropped and broken his phone that morning. Why Agomi Pierce knew Komoi's address was a mystery. Kamiju suspected he was a stalker. Kamiju then began walking with Index limp form on his back. "This is the place." He arrived after 15 minutes of walking from that back alley. A rendo suru is the backpack that is commonly used by Japanese elementary school children. Utterly unbefitting of Komoe-sensei's 12-year-old appearance, it was a two-story wooden apartment building that looked so old and worn down. Kamiju felt it must have weathered the bombing of Tokyo. Since the washing machine was sitting directly out in the passageway, it must have had nothing like a bath. Normally, Kamiju would have made jokes about it for the next 10 minutes, but he did not even smile. After checking the nameplates on the first floor doors, he climbed up the rundown and rusty metal staircase and checked the floors up there. When he reached the farthest back door on the second floor, he finally found Tsukuyomi Komoi written in hiragana. Kamijo rang the doorbell twice and then kicked the door with all his might. His foot striking the door made a tremendous noise. However, the door did not so much as budge. True to form, Kamijo had the misfortune to think he heard an unpleasant crack come from his big toe. Yes, 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 and the anti-newspaper salesman door is the only sturdy thing here. I'll open, okay? Why didn't I just wait? As Kamijo had that teary-eyed though, the door clicked open and a pajama-wearing Komoi-sensei head poked out through the crack. Her relaxed expression made it clear she could not see Index's back wound from her position. Wow, Kamijo-chan, did you start working part-time as a newspaper salesman? What newspaper has its workers solicit people with a nun on their back? Said Kamijo with displeasure. I'm in a bit of trouble, so I'll be coming in. Excuse me. Wait. Kamui-sensei frantically tried to block Kamiju's way as he pushed her aside. I can't have you suddenly coming into my room, and that isn't just because my room is a horrible mess with empty beer cans littering the floor and cigarette butts piled up in ashtrays. Sensei, yes? See if you can make the same joke after seeing what I'm carrying on my back. Okay. That's the teacher. I wasn't joking, yeah. So now you notice it. I didn't see you had such a bad wound on your back, Kamijo-chan. Kamui-sensei started panicking at the sudden sight of blood, and Kamijo finally managed to push her aside and entered the room. It looked like a room belonged to a middle-aged man who loved betting on horse races. The badly worn tatami mats had countless empty beer cans strewn across them, and the silver ashtray had a veritable mountain of cigarette butts in it. In what seemed like some kind of joke, there was even a tea table of the type a stubborn father would flip over in the middle of the room. I see. So you weren't joking. I suppose it is hardly the time, but do you have a problem with girls who smoke? Kamijo felt that was hardly the problem with it as he stared at his homeroom teacher, who looked 12, and kicked some beer cans out of the way to clear an open spot. He was reluctant to sit on the worn tatami mat, but there was no time to worry about preparing a futon. He laid index face down on the floor to ensure her wound did not touch the floor. The way the clothes were worn hid the actual wound from view, but a dark red liquid was flowing out like fuel oil. Shouldn't you call an ambulance? The phone is over there. Komoi-sensei pointed toward a corner of the room with a trembling hand. For some reason, her phone was a black rotary dial phone. The man on the blood is flowing out along with the blood. Kamijo and Komoi-sensei reflexively turned toward Index. Index was still sprawled out limply on the floor, but her eyes were silently open, even as her head lay on its side like a broken doll. Her eyes were colder than the pale moonlight, and more precise than the gears of a clock. Her eyes were so perfectly serene that they looked inhuman. Warning, Chapter 2, Verse 6, the loss of life force known as mana due to blood loss has exceeded a certain amount, so John's pen is being forcibly awoken. If the current situation persists, my body will lose the bare minimum of necessary life force and expire in about 15 minutes according to the International Standard Minute defined by the clock tower in London. It would be best if you follow the instructions I am about to give in order to perform the most efficient treatment. Komoi-sensei stared at Index in shock. Kamijo could hardly blame her, even though she had heard that voice once before. He could simply not. He simply could not get used to it. Now then, Kamichu looked over at Kamui Sensei and thought, if he re- if he out and if he out and out asked her to use magic, she would surely tell him it was hardly the time to be pretending to be a magical girl, and that she was much too old for that kind of thing anyway. So how is he supposed to convince her? Sensei, since an emergency, I'll keep this short. I need you to, and I need to tell you a secret. So come over here. What? What? Kamiju waved his hand like he was calling over a small dog, and Kamui Sensei approached with no caution whatsoever. Sorry, Kamiju apologized to Index under his breath. He lifted up her ripped clothes to reveal the horrible wound hidden beneath. He could hardly blame Kamui Sensei for jumping in shock. The wound was so bad it even shocked Kamiju. The wound was in a horizontal straight line across her back, as if it was a cardboard box someone had used a ruler and box cutter on. Past the red blood, pink muscle, yellow fat, and even some hard and white that seemed to be her backbone could be seen. It was if the wound was viewed as a red mouth, the lips around it had gone utterly pale, like someone who had been in a pool. Good. Kamiju forced away some dizziness and carefully lowered the clothing that was wet with blood. Even when the clothes touched the wound, Index's icy eyes did not move the slightest. Sensei? Yes? What? I'm going to call an ambulance in that time. You listen to what this girl has to say and do whatever she says. Just make sure she does not lose consciousness. As you can see from her clothes, she is religious. Thanks. If she viewed it as nothing more than counseling the girl, she could continue to view magic as impossible. For that reason, Kamiju had changed the focus in Kamui Sensei's mind from treating the wound to continuing the conversation by any means necessary. Okay, no chat. Kamui Sensei was nodding with an extremely serious expression and a pale face. The one problem was that Kamiju had to kill time outside while it happened. If an ambulance arrived before the magic was complete, the constellation would end. That meant he could not actually call an ambulance, but that alone did not mean Kamiju had to leave. After all, he could just call 117 with the room's back phone and pretend to be calling an ambulance while actually speaking to a recording. The real problem lay elsewhere. Hey, Index, Kamiju said softly to Index as she remained collapsed on the floor. Is there anything I can do? There is not. The best option would be for you to leave. Her overly clear and direct wording made Kamiju clench his right fist so hard it hurt. There was nothing Kamiju could do, and it was all because of his right hand that would negate the recovery magic merely by being in the room. Then Sensei, I'm going to go look for a payphone. Wait, Kamiju-chan, I have a phone here. Kamiju ignored Kamui Sensei's words, opened the door and left the room. He gritted his teeth at the fact that he could do nothing but leave. Kamiju ran through the city at night. As he ran, he clenched his right hand that could negate even the systems of God, but could not protect a single person. After Kamiju left the room, Index moved her pale lips. What is the current time in Japan Standard Time? Also, what is the date? It's 8:30 p.m. July 20th. You did not seem to look at the clock. Is that time accurate? I do not have a clock in my room, but my internal clock is accurate down to the second, so do not worry. You don't need to doubt me that much. I have heard that some jockeys have internal clocks accurate to a tenth of a second, and you can regulate with certain eating habits and rhythms of activity, replied Kamui Sensei in puzzlement. She may not have been an esper, but she was indeed a resident of Academy City. The idea of what level of knowledge was normal from medical and scientific fronts was difficult between those within the city and those without. Still lying face down on the floor, Index glanced out the window with only her eyes. From the location of the stars, not angle of and the angle of the moon, the matches of the direction of Sirius with an error of 0.038. Not to check once more. The current time in Japan Standard Time is July 20th, 8:30 p.m. Is that correct? Well, yes, it is technically not 53 seconds past that, but no, don't get up. Kamui Sensei frantically tried to push Index back down as she tried to sit up, which would further damage her already injured body, but Index's gaze did not waver in the slightest. Her gaze was neither frightening nor piercing. All emotion had simply disappeared from her eyes like a light switch had been turned off. There was no real presence in her eyes. It was like her soul was missing. It is no matter, it can be regenerated, said Index, as she headed for the tea table in the center of the room. It is near the end of Cancer. The time is between 8 and 12 midnight. The direction is west. Under the protection of Undying, the role of the angel is the cherub. The son of Komoe Sensei gulping could be heard throughout the room. Unexpectedly, Index started drawing some kind of figure atop the small tea table with her bloody finger. Even those who did not know what a magic circle was would recognize that it was something religious. Kamui Sensei had already grown timid, but now something overwhelmed her to the point that she could not speak. After drawing a circle of blood that filled the tea table, Index drew a star-shaped symbol known as a pentagram. Writing in some strange language was written all around it. Those words were likely the same thing Index was muttering. She had asked about the constellations and time because the words written changed depending on the time and season. As Index put together her magic, she showed none of the weakness of one who was injured. Her extreme focus made it seem like her sense of pain had been temporarily cut off altogether. A silent chill ran down Kamui Sensei's back as she heard the dripping of blood coming from the girl's back. Well, what's this? Magic, Index paused after that one word. I will now be needing your help and your body. If you do as I say, no one will meet any misfortune. And you will not be the target of anyone's resentment. How can you say that so calmly? Just lie down and wait for the ambulance. Bandages. With a wound this bad, I should bind the area around the artery to stop blood flow. The level of treatment cannot completely close up my wound. I am not familiar with the term ambulance, but it is capable of completely closing this wound. Is it capable of closing this wound in the next 15 minutes and supply me with the needed level of mana? Is it mana or mana? Mana? It was true that an ambulance would take 10 minutes to arrive, even if they called right that instant. It would take that long again to get her back to the hospital, and the treatment would not start the second she arrived at the hospital. Kamui Sensei did not really understand what an occult term like mana meant, but it was true. Just closing the wound would not bring back her stamina. Even if the wound was closed right that instant with a needle and thread, would that pale girl be too weak to live long enough to recover her missing stamina? Please, said Index, without Please, said Index, without changing her expression in the slightest. A mix of fresh blood and saliva was dripping from the corner of her mouth. There was no intensity in her. There was nothing ghastly in her either, but that calm and composure was scarier than either of those. The way everything she did seemed to widen the wound, make made her seem like a broken machine continuing to run without realizing anything was amiss. If I do anything that makes her resist, her situation could become even worse. Kamui Sensei sighed. She, of course, did not believe in magic. However, Kamiju had told her to keep the conversation going to make sure their girl did not lose consciousness. All she could do was try to not provoke the girl sitting before her and place her hopes in Kamiju, calling an ambulance as quickly as possible, if not sooner, and in the splendid first aid of the EMTs in the ambulance. So what should I do? I'm not a magical girl. I thank you for your cooperation first. Take that. What is that black thing? Oh, that is a video game memory card. Well, fine. At any rate, take the black thing and place it in the middle of the table. Technically, it's a tea table. Kamui Sensei did as she was told and placed the memory card in the middle of the tea table. Then she took out a mechanical pencil, lead case, an empty box of chocolates, and 2 small paper bag boots, and put them on the tea table as well. She also took 2 small figurines that came with her food and lined them up next to each other. Kamui Sensei wondered what the point of it was, but Index was still completely serious despite looking about ready to collapse. All of Kamui Sensei's complaints disappeared before the Japanese sword-like gaze coming from that pale face. All of Kamui Sensei's complaints disappeared before the Japanese sword-like gaze coming from that pale face. Okay. What is this? You called it magic? But isn't this just playing with dolls? Sure enough, it all looked like a miniature version of the room. The memory card was the tea table, the 2 books standing up were the bookshelf and closet, and the 2 figurines were in the exact place of the 2 people in the room. When glass beads were scattered over the tea table, they seemed to stop in the places that exactly replicated the beer cans scattered across the floor. The substance do not matter. It is the same as how a magnifying glass magnifies regardless of whether the lens is made of glass or plastic. As long as the form and rule are the same, a ceremony is possible, muttered Index as she dripped with sweat. I just need you to accurately carry out my instructions. If you mistake the order, the pathways in your brain and your neural circuitry could be fried. I am saying that failure will turn your body into mincemeat and kill you. Please be careful. But Kamui Sensei almost spat out, but Index continued without paying it any heed. Well, we will now create a template for the angel to descend into. Follow my lead and chant. What Index said after that went beyond words had become nothing but sound. Without thinking about the meaning, Kamui Sensei tried copying just the tone in something like humming or singing, and Kya! Suddenly the figures on top of the tea table started to sing and as well. Kya! One of them screamed with the exact same timing. The figures were vibrating just as the vibration is transmitted along the string in a string telephone, and comes out a voice in the paper cup on the other end. The figure vibrated and reproduced Kamui Sensei's voice. The reason Kamui Sensei did not panic and run from the room right then and there was likely because she lived in a city with 2.3 million espers in it. The normal person would have thought they were out of their mind. Link complete. Index's voice and the voice from the tea table made it to sound double. Link complete. Index's voice and the voice from the tea table made it sound double. The temple created on the table has been linked to this room. To put it simply, everything that happens in this room will happen on the table. Everything that happens on the table will happen in this room. Okay, that's page 91. Need to see when the next chapter is. I forgot. Sorry, everyone. Okay. This is 119. 119. 119. 119. 119. 119. 119. 119. 119. 119. 119. 119. 119. 119. 119. 119. 119. 119. 119. 119. 119. 119. 119. 119. 119. 119. 119. 119. 119. 119. 119. 119. 119. 119. 119. 119. 119. 119. 119. 119. 119. 119. 119. 119. 119. 119. 119. 119. 119. 119. 119. 119. 119. 119. 119. 119. 119. 119. 119. 119. 119. 119. 119. 119. 119. 119. 119. 119. 119. 119. 119. 119. 119. 119. 119. 119. 119. 119. 119. 119. 119. 119. 119. 119. 119. 119. 119. 119. 119. 119. 119. 119. 119. 119. 119. Right, let me go down to 119. I'm just looking, sorry. Okay, that is not when the next chapter is. Okay, okay, let me look up chapter 3. Okay, chapter 3 seems to be on page 127. So I'll stop at page 126. Okay, the incomplete index's voice and the voice from the tea table made it sound double. The temple created on the table has been linked to this room. To put it simply, everything that happens in this room will happen on the table, and everything that happens on the table will happen in this room. Index pushed the tea table lightly with her foot. In the instant, the entire apartment shook under Kamui Sensei's feet as if from some great shock. She could feel the stuffy air of the room growing as clear as the air in the forest in the early morning. However, nothing like an angel was present. All that was there was what could be described as an invisible presence. A feeling assaulted Komoe Sensei's entire body like she was being watched by thousands of eyeballs from every direction. And then Index suddenly shouted, Imagine a golden angel with the body of a child. Imagine a beautiful angel with 2 wings. Well, when carrying out magic, determining the field was important. For example, a pebble thrown into the sea does not make much of a ripple. However, a pebble dropped into a bucket makes quite a ripple. It was the same as that. To alter the world with magic, the field in which the alteration would take place had to be demarcated. A protector was a temporary god with a small demarcated world. If one properly imagined a protector, fixated in form, or freely controlled it, one could. If one properly imagined a protector, fixated its form, and freely controlled it, one could more easily cause mysterious things to happen in a limited field. Kamui Sensei did not receive any such explanation, and she was having a hard time imagining an angel. The term golden angel only made her think of that thing about 1 gold or 5 silver ones. As the image of Kamui Sensei's mind lost coherence, the surrounding present followed suit and lost its form. An unpleasant feeling ran down Kamui Sensei's back as she was wrapped in the rotten mud from the bottom of a swamp. Just imagine it. This will not actually call it an angel, it is just a gathering of invisible mana. It will take form according to your will as the magic user. This is the reference to Japanese candy known as choco balls. If you're lucky, the package will either have a gold angel or silver angel printed on it. 1 gold angel or 5 silver angels can be exchanged for a can of toys. She must have truly been desperate, because even the voice of that cool mechanical index grew sharp as an icicle. Kamui Sensei's eyes opened wide at that sudden change as she hurriedly started muttering under her breath, A cute angel, a cute angel, a cute angel. Hazily, she frantically called up an image of the girl angel as she had seen in a shoujo magazine long ago. Whatever it was that felt like invisible mud hanging on in the air of the room took form as it had been shoved inside a human-shaped balloon. Or at least that was how it seemed to Kamui-sensei. She timidly opened her eyes to check. Huh? This will not actually call me an angel? Call in an angel? In that instant, that doubt it entered her mind. The human-shaped water balloon burst, and the invisible mud splattered across the room. Kya! The fixation of its form has failed. Index looked around with her sharp gaze. If the temple is at least protected by a blue-collar undyne, that is enough. Continue. Her words were positive enough, but Index's eyes were not smiling in the slightest. Kamui-sensei flinched back like a child whose parents had just seen a failed test, that test she had tried to keep hidden. Chant, it will be over with just a bit more. A sharp order would not let Kamui-sensei lose her composure despite her rising confusion and flagging thoughts. Index, Kamui-sensei, and the two figurines on the tea table sang. The back of Index's figurine on the table began to melt. It was as if it was rubber being held up to a lighter. It melted the surface lost its unevenness. It grew smooth. It cooled. It hardened once more, and its form came back together. Kamui-sensei felt like her heart was freezing over. Currently, Index was sitting across the tea table from her. She did not have the courage to circle around and see what was happening to Index's back. Index's pale face was covered in oily sweat. Her glassy eyes still showed no signs of pain or suffering. Replenishment of mana and stabilization of condition confirmed. Returning John Penn's to dormant mode. Like a switch had been flipped, a soft light returned to Index's eyes. Like a fire being lit in a cooled fireplace, a warmth filled the room's atmosphere. The look in Index's eyes was so kind and warm that Kamui-sensei could not help but feel the warmth. It was the look of a normal girl. Now, if the descended protector is returned and the temple is destroyed, it will be over. Index smiled painfully. This is what magic is. It's the same as how apple and Ringo mean the same thing. You do not need a glass wand with a plastic umbrella. It's just as clear. It is the same with tarot cards. As long as the design and numbers match, you can perform divinations with the cutouts from the back of the shoujo magazine. Index's sweating did not stop. Kamui-sensei grew even more afraid. She started to think what she had done had only made Index's condition worse. Don't worry, Index looked about ready to collapse even then. It is the same as with a cold. You need your own strength to get over it. The wound itself has been closed up, so I'll be fine. As soon as she said that, Index collapsed to the side. The figurine fell over, the tea table shook slightly, and the room linked to it was assaulted with a thundering tremble. Kamui-sensei was about to run around the tea table to Index, but Index began to sing. When Kamui-sensei followed along and sang one last song, the strange atmosphere returned to being the normal stuffy atmosphere of the apartment. Kamui-sensei cautiously shook the tea table, but nothing happened. Ringo is Japanese for apple. Okay. Thank goodness. As Kamui-sensei closed her eyes in relief, Index spoke. Kamui-sensei would have thought anyone would be glad to have her deadly wound healed, but the nun said something else. I'm glad I did not burden anyone with anything. Kamui-sensei stared at Index in surprise. If I died here, he may have had to bear the burden. Index closed her eyes like she was dreaming and said nothing more. When the girl had been sliced in the back and collapsed, when she had performed that strange ritual, she had never once been thinking about herself. She had been thinking about the person who had carried her there. Kamui-sensei could not think in the same way. She had no one to think that way about. That's why she asked one thing. She was sure Index was already asleep and would not hear her, but that was exactly why she asked it, and yet the girl answered with her eyes still closed. I don't know. She had never felt that way about anyone before. She did not know what the feeling was, but when he had recklessly gotten mad for her when faced with that magician, she had wanted him to run away, even if she had to crawl up to him and make him. And when he had returned from Innocentius, she had thought she was going to cry when he had returned. She did not really understand, but when she was with him, nothing ever went as she wanted, and she felt pushed around. And yet those unexpected feelings were so much fun and made her so happy. She did not know what the feeling was, though. This time, Index fell into a deep sleep with a smile on her face, like she was having a pleasant dream. Part 2. After dawn came, her symptoms were very similar to those of a cold. Index was bedridden, with high fever and a headache. She did not have a runny nose or a sore throat because it was not due to a virus. It was simply a matter of regaining her missing stamina, so no matter how much immunity-strengthening cold medicine she took, it would not solve anything. So why are you wearing only panties down below? As Index lay with a wet towel on her forehead, she must not have been able to stand the hot dampness inside the futon, so she had one leg sticking out in Kamiju's direction. She was wearing a pale green pajama top, and yet her bright skin-colored thigh was sticking out to its base. Due to her fever, the skin was a bit pink. The towel had grown lukewarm, so Kamui-sensei stuck in a basin of water and splashed it around while glaring at Kamiju. Kamiju-chan, I think those clothes were a bit too much. Those clothes. Likely referred to the safety pin covered white man's habit. Kamiju agreed with her 100% on that, but Index looked like a displeased cat over having her familiar habit taken from her. The real question is just how the pajamas of a beer-loving, heavy-smoking adult like you fit Index so perfectly. Just what is the age difference between you anyway? What? Kamui-sensei, age unknown, was at a loss for words, but Index went into kick her while she was down. Please do not look down on me like that. These pajamas are actually a bit tight around the chest. What? Impossible. That can't be right. That can't be right. Now you're just making fun of me, protested Kamui-sensei. Actually, do you even have anything in the chest area for it to be tied around? Asked Kamiju. As the two ladies glared at him, Kamiju's soul reflexively entered prostration mode. Right. By the way, Kamiju-chan, who exactly is this girl? My little sister. That is a blatant lie. With that silver hair and those green eyes, she is clearly a foreigner. She is my stepsister. You're a pervert? I'm just kidding. I'm well aware that a stepsister is bad manners, but a real sister is against the rules. Kamiju-chan, she said, suddenly switching over to her teacher's voice. Kamiju fell silent. It was not really surprising that Kamui-sensei wanted to know what was going on. Not only had he brought a strange foreigner to her, but the girl had a blade wound on her back and clearly smelled of bad news, and Kamui-sensei had even been made to take part in some strange bit of magic. It would have been difficult to ask her to turn a blind eye to it all. Sensei, can I ask one thing? What? Are you asking so you can tell Anti-Skill Academy City's board of directors? Yes, Kamui-sensei said immediately with a nod. With no hesitation, she had told her student she was going to sell them out. I do not know what kind of situation you two are in, Kamui-sensei smiled, but if it happened here in Academy City, it is our duty as teachers to resolve it. Taking responsibility for the children is the duty of the adults. Not that I know you are in some kind of trouble. I cannot sit idly by. That was what Tsukuyomi Komoi said, and yet she had no power, no strength, and no duty to do so. She merely said it was straightforwardness of a famous katana slicing straight through the proper place at the proper time. I just started Kamichu before finishing under his breath. Kane stand up to her. Kamichu had lived a long 15 years or so, and yet she had never seen someone else like that, teacher of the type seen in dramas and not even seen in movies anymore. And so, if you were a complete stranger, I would not hesitate to get you involved, but I owe you for that magic, so I can't let you get involved. Kamiju's response was just as straightforward. He had already had enough of seeing people who were willing to protect others for nothing in return. He heard before his eyes. Kamui-sensei fell silent for a bit. I'm not going to let you get away with trying to trick me with some cool line. Sensei, why did you just stand up and head for the door? I'm giving this a stay of execution. I need you to go to the supermarket for groceries, Kamijo-chan. You figure out exactly what it is you need to tell me in that time. And I may get so caught up in shopping that I forget. No cheating when I get back. Make sure you tell me, okay? Kamijo thought Kamui-sensei was smiling as she said that. With the sound of the apartment door opening and then closing, Kamijo and Index were left alone in the room. She's trying to be kind. From the smile of a child plotting something on her face, Kamijo had a feeling Kamui-sensei would have forgot everything once she returned from the supermarket. If he later decided to consult her about it, she would surely act furious and say, "Why didn't you tell me sooner? I completely forgot." As she happily agreed to help. With a sigh, Kamijo turned toward Index, who lay in the futon. "Sorry, I know this is no time to be worried about appearances." "Don't worry about it. This is for the best." Index shook her head. "It would be wrong to get her any more involved, and she cannot use any more magic." Kamijo frowned. "Grimoires are dangerous. When in them is aberrant and uncommon knowledge, as well as twisted laws that break the common laws of the world. Whether they are for good or evil, those things are toxic in the world. Merely learning knowledge of a different world will destroy. Merely learning knowledge of a different world will destroy the brains of the one who learns it," explained Index. Kamijo tried to translate that in a way he understood. "So it's like forcibly running a program that is not compatible with the computer's OS?" "My brain and spirit are protected by religious barriers, and magicians who attempt to exceed being human must exceed the boundaries of their own common knowledge to arrive at the desired state of mind, which could almost be likened to a type of insanity. However, for a normal person from a weakly religious country like Japan, it could all be over after just casting one more spell." I see. Kamijo somehow managed to not let the shock he had received show. "Well, that's a shame. I was hoping she would be able to perform alchemy for me. You know alchemy, right? It can turn lead into gold." He, of course, omitted the fact that he knew this from an item mixing RPG with a young female alchemist as his protagonist. "Well, there's a technique for that called lemon magna, but preparing the tools with modern materials will cost 7 trillion yen in this country's currency." "Well, that definitely isn't worth it," muttered Kamijo soullessly. Index smiled weakly and said, "Yeah, turning lead into gold accomplishes nothing more than making nobles happy. But wait, now that I think about it, what does that do? How does it work? If you're turning lead into gold, are you rearranging the PB atoms into AU?" "I don't really know, but it's only a 14th century technique." "Wait, do you mean what I think you mean? It might actually be changing the atomic arrangement?" You mean you could cause poison decay without a particle accelerator and nuclear fusion without a nuclear reactor? Wait a second, I'm not even sure the level 5s of Akami City can do that. Wait, you don't look so confused. If you're wondering just how amazing that would be, that kind of thing would let us easily create atomic robots or mobile suits. What are those? With those 3 words, she cast aside all of the dreams of men. As Kamiju's head hung down limply, Index seemed to feel as she does something wrong. Seemed to feel she had done something wrong. Anyways, the holy swords, and magic wands used in ceremonies can be made with modern materials as substitutes, but there is a limit. This especially goes for sacred items related to God, as such as the Lance of Longinus, Joseph's Holy Grail, or the Rood. Even after 1,000 years, it seems no substitutes can be made out. As she talked on and on excitedly, she started holding her temple like she had a hangover. Amitu Toba looked at Index's face as she lay in the futon. She had 103,000 grimoires in her head. Just reading one of them could drive you insane, and yet she had had each and every letter of all those books in her head. How much pain in that process caused her? How much pain had that process caused her? And yet Index never once complained of her pain. Do you want to know? She asked, as if apologizing to Kamiju and while ignoring her own pain. Index's usual cheerful tone had set a context that made that quiet voice stand out and seemed to hold even more determination. Sensei, you idiot. Index's solution did not particularly matter to Kamiju. Whatever situation she might be in, there was no way she could abandon her. As long as she could defeat the enemies and keep her safe, she saw no reason to dig into her old wounds. Do you want to know what my circumstances are? Repeated the girl, naming herself Index. Kamichu made up his mind and replied, that kind of makes me feel like a priest, you know. In a way, it really did. He felt like a priest listening to the confessions of a sinner. Do you know why? Index said. The Christian church was originally a single organization, but now there are the Catholics, the Protestants, the Roman Catholics, the Russian Orthodox, the Anglicans, the Nestorians, the Athanasians, the Gnostics, and more. Do you know why this split occurred? Well, Kamiju had at least skimmed through the history textbook, so he had an idea what the answer was. However, he hesitated to mention in front of the real Index. That's good enough, Index actually smiled. It was because politics were mixed in with the church. Sects split, opposed each other. When's the next part? Okay, I think I'm gonna read until page 109 instead. Okay. That's good enough, Index actually smiled. It was because politics were mixed in with the church. Sects split, opposed each other, and fought. In the end, even people who believed in the same God were each other's enemies. Even as we believe in the same God, we each walk a different one of many scattered paths. Of course. Any chat? No chat. Okay. Of course, people's ideas on things naturally deferred. Some wanted to make money with the word of God, while others refused to allow that. Some felt they were loved by God more than anyone else in the world, while others refused to accept that. After the sects stopped interacting with each other, we each underwent our own isolated development, which gave us our individual characteristics. We changed in accordance to the situation or in cultures of our countries. Index let out a small breath. The Roman Catholic Church manages and controls the word. The Russian Orthodox Church searches out and eliminates the occult, and the Anglican Church I belong to, Index's words caught in her throat for a second. Index's words caught in her throat for a second. England is a magic country, she said, as if that was a bitter memory. So the Anglican Church is especially advanced in anti-magic culture and techniques such as witch hunts and the Inquisition. In London alone were a number of public companies calling themselves magic cabals, and there were 10 times that many shell corporations that really only existed on paper. The trial and error had begun as a means of protection the citizens from the evil magicians lurking in the city had developed too far in one direction and at some point become a culture of slaughter and execution. The Anglican Church has a special division, said Index, as if she was confessing her own sins. It investigates magic and develops countermeasures with which to defeat magicians. It is known as Nasarcius. She sounded exactly like a nun. If you do not know your enemy, you cannot defend against their attacks. However, understanding an impure enemy will make your own heart impure, and touching an impure enemy will make your body impure. That is why Nasarcius, the Church of Necessary Evils, was created to draw out all those impurities into one place. The most extreme case of this is the 103,000 grimoires. Yes, Index gave a small nod. Magic is something like an equation. If you skillfully reverse the calculations, you can counteract your opponent's attack. That is why I had these 103,000 grimoires put into me. If you know magic from all around the world, you can neutralize magic from all around the world. Kamichu looked down at his right hand. He had thought his right hand was of no use. The power of his right hand would not let him defeat even a single delinquent, would not raise his scores on tests, and would not make him popular with girls, so he had manly just ignored it. But this girl had gone through hell to achieve the same thing. But if these grimoires are so dangerous and you know where they are, why don't you just burn them without reading them, as long as there are people to read and learn from these grimoires? Magicians will continue to appear without end, right? The actual books are less important than the contents. Even if you got rid of an original, the magicians who knew the content would pass that on to their followers, so it would be pointless. Although someone who does that is known as a sorcerer rather than a magician, explained Index. Is it something like data posted on the internet? Even if you delete the original data, copy after copy of the data will continue to exist. Also, a grimoire is nothing more than a textbook. Index sounded like she was in pain. Just reading one does not make you a magician. Magicians change it up to suit themselves and create new type of magic. It was less like data and more like a constantly changing computer virus. To completely eliminate the virus, you had to be constantly analyzing the virus and creating new antivirus software. When referring to the original grimoires, the Japanese gives the English word origin in furigana. This was changed to original since it is almost the same and sounds better in English. Magician is pronounced Majutsushi. Sorcerer is pronounced Madoshi. Okay. Let me check YouTube. As I said before, grimoires are dangerous. Index narrowed her eyes when disposing just a copy. An expert in the inquisitioner must sew his eyes shut to prevent pollution of his brain, and even then it takes 5 years of baptisms to fully rid of them rid him of the poison. The human mind cannot handle the original. The only option for the 103,000 originals scattered about the world is to seal them. If it was as if she was discussing what to do with the vast collection of leftover nuclear weapons. Actually, that was more or less what it was. Most likely, the very people who had written them had not expected this. But can magic be used by any normal person, excluding us espers? Then wouldn't this spread throughout the world in no time at all? Kamijo recalled stylus flames. What if everyone in the world could use that kind of power? The common knowledge of what the world can of that world can build that the common knowledge of that world can the common knowledge of that world that built its foundations of on science would crumble. You don't need to worry about that. The magic cabals do not recklessly let the grimoires get out to the general public. Why not? Wouldn't it be better for them to have more comrades to fight for them? That is exactly why. If every single person who had a gun was friends, there would be no war. Just because two people knew magic did not mean they were on the same side. It's just because they knew the power of their trump cards that they did not want to recklessly create enemy magicians. The grimoires were treated like the plans to a new weapon. I think I get it. Kamijo seemed deep in thought. So basically, they want to get their hands on the bomb in your head. She was a library with perfect copies of the world's 103,000 original grimoires in her head. To obtain her was to obtain all the magic in the world, right from her voice. It sounded like she was about to die. With the 103,000 grimoires, you would be able to twist everything in the world to your will without exception. This is what we call a magic god. Not the god of the demon world, but someone who had thoroughly mastered magic to the point of entering a domain of God. A magic god. Fuck that. Without realizing, Kamijo had begun gritting his back teeth. He could tell from how Index was acting that she had not had those 103,000 grimoires put in her head because she wanted to. Kamijo recalled Styles' flames. She lived like that for no other reason than to prevent as many victims as she could. Kamijo could not stand how the magicians were using those feelings to their advantage, and she could not stand how the church referred to as impure. All of them were treating a human being like a thing, and Index might have seen nothing but people who did that. The fact that she still thought of everyone but herself, despite that, was what Kamijo could stand the least. Sorry. Kamijo had no clue what it was he had so mad about, but that one word made him truly snap. He lightly tapped Index on the forehead. Oh, come on. Why did you not tell me about something that important? Index froze in place as Kamijo stared at that bedridden girl with his canines bared. Her eyes opened wide like she had done something horribly wrong, and her lips frantically moved like she was trying to say something. But I didn't think you would believe me, and I didn't want to scare you all. I didn't want to scare you, and Index seemed about to burst into tears. Her voice grew quieter and quieter as she spoke. Kamijo could barely hear her toward the end. Still, Kamijo heard her say, I didn't want you to hate me. No, fuck that. He literally heard a snapping noise. Don't look down on people and come up with your own estimation of them. Church secrets, 103,000 grimoires, yeah, that stuff is amazing and incredible. And yes, it all seems so absurd that I still don't really believe it, but Kamijo paused for a bit. Is that all? Index's eyes opened wide. Maybe I can stop at this picture. Okay. Not the god of the demon world, but someone who had thoroughly mastered magic to the point of entering a domain of God. A magic god. Fuck that. Oh, wait, whoops. Oh, sorry, I already read that page. Sorry. Her small lips frantically moved like she was trying to say something, but no words came out. Don't look down on me like that. Do you really think I would call you creepy or disgusting or something just because you memorized 103,000 grimoires? Do you think I would abandon you and run off the instant the magician showed up? Fuck that. If that was all I was capable of, I wouldn't have taken you in the first place. As Kamichu spoke, he finally realized what it was he was upset about. Kamichu had simply wanted to be some help to Index. He had not wanted to see Index get hurt anymore. That was all. And yet she had not let Kamichu protect her while she put herself in harm's way to protect him. Kamichu had wanted to hear her ask for help just once, and that had been frustrating for him. So very frustrating. Just trust me a little. Don't come up with your own estimation of people. That was all there was to it. Even if he had not had his right hand and had been a normal person, he would have been no reason for Kamichu to back down. Oh. Even if he had not had his right hand and had been a normal person, that would have been no reason for Kamichu to back down. No such reason could exist. Index merely stared at Kamichu's face in astonishment for a while, but then tears welled up in her eyes. It was as if her eyes were made of ice and begun to melt. Index clenched her lips, sealed to choke down the sobs, but they trembled as if she could not stand it much longer. She drew the futon up to her mouth and bit onto it. Her tears and her eyes grew so large, it looked like she would have been bawling like a kindergartner if it was not for the blanket. In all likelihood, those tears were merely in response to the words Kamichu had spoken just then. Kamichu was not conceited enough to think it was. He doubted his words that made that much of an impression on her. Most likely something that had been building up within her Kamichu was not conceited enough to think it was. He doubted his words had made that much of an impression on her. Most likely something that had been building within her had come flowing out with his words as a trigger, just as he felt his heart break at the thought that no one has ever said those words to her before. Kamichu also felt that he finally seen Index's weakness, which made him a bit more happy. Okay, there's the sick nun girl. Okay, I'm gonna stop here for today. I didn't reach my goal, but we can read more tomorrow, I guess, if people want that. Not sure anyone saw my stream, but that's okay. Anyways, thank you and good night.